Where to start?
Ethan Winters.
Ethan Winters.
Mr. Winters.
Ethan Winters.
Ethan. Poor Ethan.
Ethan Winters. Welcome.
Today we are going to be diving into our favorite protagonist of the RE series, Ethan Winters. Let's start off by going into his everyday life. Ethan was living in Los Angeles, California and worked as a systems engineer. On May 29, 2011, he married his Texan girlfriend Mia Winters. That is as much as we know of his life prior to the incident at the Baker residence, excluding some theories we have. Mia went on a babysitting job in 2014 as Ethan would know it. That obviously was not the case. In the time of 2014 to 2017, all we can expect was Ethan anticipating Mia's return. On the phone call to a friend that we see at the beginning of RE7, the man on the other end of the phone talks about Ethan leaving so soon, and him not believing Mia is alive. After all, it had been 3 years. Ethan quickly tells him that it's real and that he received a letter from her to come find her. What we can speculate from that is Ethan may have been having nightmares or trouble sleeping due to the fact of his wife mysteriously disappearing. It definitely would have taken a toll on him, especially since it looked like people had moved on from it.
Now let's move on to the events of RE7. Ethan arrives at the place mentioned in the letter, Deauville, Louisiana. When he gets there, he is met with a big house in the middle of the bayou. It doesn't take long for Ethan to find Mia locked up in a cell, seemingly being awoken from a sleep. Compared to her healthy look in RE8, you can tell she was in horrible shape and malnourished. She seems to be in a state of shock from seeing Ethan and mumbles things to herself that he questions her about, but receives no response. Not short after, Mia gets dragged away and he pursues. We get a whole sequence of Mia being turned by Evelyn and unable to control herself from hurting Ethan. She attempts to stab him multiple times and one slips and goes right through his hand. Then a fight breaks out where Ethan has to drive an axe right through her shoulder. There are interesting pieces of dialogue that Mia mentions in this portion and the later portion involving the gun and chainsaw fight. She talks about what Ethan is hiding, but what could she mean by that? We have some theories we will talk about to go along with that statement.
You were always watching me. Why? What are you hiding? What?
We also get an interactive cutscene where Mia jump scares Ethan and cuts his left hand off. His reaction to such a painful thing can seem quite odd for someone who is just a normal person. He seems to be resilient for someone with no prior knowledge compared to having military training in Resident Evil 8.
Now the big reveal of Resident Evil Village and a really questionable point in RE7. After going against Mia and defeating her with a gun, Jack Baker comes in and kills Ethan up in the attic. He then wakes up and his hand that was cut off is stapled back on by Zoe. It is at this point that Ethan has been infected with the mold. Take into consideration that for the mold to infect you after death, you have to die on the soil where the megamycete lives. This is how Mother Miranda was able to find out about Ava's consciousness and tried to bring her back to life, despite Ava dying by the Spanish flu. Miranda was also infecting people by using her version of the Cadeau to orally infect them. Ethan got killed by brute force. He goes throughout the whole game trying to find a cure for his wife. Finally, after finding it, he is able to give her the antidote made from the other experiments in order to create a vessel for Ava that is explained in RE8. Ethan takes Mia on the boat and sails off away from the property. They get near the Annabelle, the ship Mia was transporting Evelyn in. As they get into the vicinity of the ship, mold attacks the boat and it fades. We wake up as Mia, and as she takes a few steps forward, Ethan is dragged away by said mold. This portion of the game shows us more about Mia's mission in taking care of Evelyn. We will talk more about this in a deep dive of Mia Winters. Fast forward to the end of her section of the game. We found Ethan encased in the mold and we pry him out. As we do so, Evelyn states about Ethan not loving Mia. Was this a ploy for Evelyn to change Mia's mind about wanting to save him? Or was it hinting at something else we don't know about? As far as we could tell about their relationship, it was all love. Was Ethan's doubts about what Mia is hiding that he mentions a lot, making him lose love for her or not trust her anymore? It is all up to speculation at this point. Mia gives Ethan the injection for Evelyn and locks herself in the room before she can turn and harm him more. At the end of the game, we see the two of them riding off in a helicopter, and that concludes the main story of Resident Evil 7.
Now let's move on to the story of Resident Evil Village. We are met with a story read by Mia, who looks much healthier than she did before. The person who she is reading the book to is their 6-month-old baby daughter, Rosemary Winters. Now the Winters family resides in Romania as per orders of the BSAA and Chris Redfield, or so we're told. As we couldn't see Ethan in RE7, weirdly there are sheets covered over mirrors around the house. Capcom deciding to continue to hide Ethan's face adds to the mystery of who he could really be. After putting his baby to sleep, he heads downstairs. It is mentioned multiple times already about how Mia is trying to forget about the past events in 2017. We find out later in the game that the Mia that was standing in the kitchen that night was actually Miranda. On the contrary, Ethan mentions in a diary entry on his computer about the real Mia giving the same attitude towards the situation around the time Rose was born. This reaction shows the conflict of Mia and her involvement on why everything happened the way it did. Her guilt that her husband was mauled and dead this whole time because of something she was involved in. Miranda is gunned down by Chris and his team, and they were supposed to be transported to a facility, but got ambushed by Miranda, who faked being a corpse. It is stated that everyone in that car had gotten killed, which would mean Ethan included. He is now left to fend for himself and find his way to civilization. Coincidentally, there is a town not far from the accident. The message displayed in the trailers for RE8 showed an emphasis on Ethan as a person, despite people having no clue who he is in the game. As important as his name was, only Duke was knowledgeable about him. Heisenberg knowing about him too was all because of Duke. Alcina is clueless, Moreau is clueless, Donna is clueless, and even Miranda was clueless to the extent of knowing Ethan's powers.
When we get to the family meeting, Ethan is up for auction to any of the 4 lords. Miranda chooses Heisenberg. This is probably due to the fact that she knows about his plans to take her down. Heisenberg specifically tells him to show us what you're made of, and that he's truly as strong as they say. Is he referring to the stories he heard from Duke? Who could they be? Could it be the BSAA? It is important to note that Heisenberg had files on the BSAA, and knew not only their involvement but their actions on what would happen that night. A scene that stuck out to us was after you get out of the dungeons and grab the Dimitrescu key that Alcina hangs up. She heads back into the room she just stormed out of and breaks Ethan through the floor. As he continues on and finds a lever to pull, Alcina slices his other hand off. We pick it up and make a run for it. As he is heading up back to the castle, he attaches his right hand by drenching it in the chemical fluid mixed with herbs. This is similar to a scene earlier in the game where the Dimitrescu daughters hang him up by his hands. He has an instinct to go to a first aid kit. What would prompt him to believe it would work? And in the first case, make his arm reattach. When he puts his arm back on, he brushes it off and continues on. Never once does he question it. Does this make the animation missable where Jack cuts his leg off canon? Jack grabs Ethan's leg and puts a first aid next to it and tells him to come get it. Ethan does so and only questions it a bit, but did he learn it from here, or is there more to it? Even if he did learn that there, he didn't know he was dead until the very end of RE8 with a talk with Evelyn. So what would make him believe some random man who had his wife in a cell and was trying to kill him?
As a normal person as Ethan would know himself up until the end of Resident Evil Village, why would he believe he could do all these things? Having a drive to save your family no matter what is one thing, but being able to reattach limbs and automatically know how to pour a heal on it is another. In RE7, he knows his arm was actually stapled, even though that would not work in real life, but why try to heal with what happens with Alcina? Any other person would have found it as a lost cause, or in Ethan's case, maybe find something to staple or sew it back, not use a liquid. Even in Zoe's case, stapling his arm back on would work. Did she know he was dead or infected with the mold too at the time? Moving on, after defeating Alcina, we get the reveal of Rosemary being cut into pieces and stored in jars. Ethan's madness is justified and Duke asks him if he has any other choice but to listen to him about saving his daughter. Though that can be a valid argument for Ethan to believe him, did he, in the back of his mind, think that because of him having healing abilities, his daughter would have them too? The child was in 4 pieces separating her into the head, torso, arms, and legs. To think that the child could come back fully was a stretch for anyone else. We will mainly break down Donna's portion another time for our video about Mia, but one thing stuck out to us. She mentions not telling Ethan something. Could this be about his actual death? Rosemary having powers? Or something else revolving around Ethan that he has tried to pry out of her before?
Mia, what are you talking about?
I love you both so much. I had to. I had to do it.
There is a statement before getting to Donna's house where a flashback of Mia says, "Ethan, you have to fix her." What does she mean by that? How could Ethan fix her? She sounds like she is full of desperation and anxiety, so it couldn't be a normal cold that any child would have. This isn't something you say to your significant other about your child.
Ethan, come with me. There's something I have to tell you.
Mia? What's going on?
Rose feels different. Ethan, you have to fix her.
What the hell is this?
Everyone leaves me. Even Rose. I don't want to be alone.
This can't be real.
We fast forward to the end of Heisenberg's portion before his boss fight. Chris reveals the truth about Miranda. What is weird about this cutscene is the sudden fade. Are they hiding some important information to reveal in Resident Evil 9? In the Baker incident report, Chris has been doing research on Miranda for a long while. Maybe this could be him trying his best to catch Ethan up to speed, since that was the only thing that he could do in the moment, as he didn't want Ethan to be put more in harm's way. After the fight with Heisenberg, we get a cutscene with Miranda. She reveals her plans with Rose and how she is the perfect vessel for Ava, a perfected Evelyn as she would call her. Miranda proceeds to kill Ethan by ripping his heart out. He drops to the ground, and now we head over to Chris. A member of the Hound Wolf Squad mentions to him that they couldn't retrieve his body. It's later revealed that the Duke had taken his body and watched the fight, since he brought it up saying it's a sight to see. At the end of Chris's portion, we meet the real Mia in a cell locked up after being caught and experimented on. The weird thing about all of this is that if Mia worked for the Connections and Miranda found out about Rosemary that way, did Mia never really tell anyone about Ethan? What would make Rose so special if she was born to normal parents? Now we get the little argument between Mia and Chris. He tries breaking down the news to her, as you can hear the pain in his voice, but as soon as he does, Mia objects. She is consistent with her anger the whole time up until this point. She states, "You're wrong, you don't know how special he is." This then takes us back to the Megamycete world, which is confirmed in Shadows of Rose. This is similar to the cutscene in RE7 when Ethan is talking to Jack and Zoe and they are sitting in the living room. We continue on only for a little bit until another cutscene happens. Evelyn reveals herself and explains the situation to Ethan in a mocking way. She questions him by saying, "You didn't think it was weird, no matter how much you got hurt?" And Ethan doesn't say anything. Why would he stay quiet? Did he feel like he got caught, or did he really not know what to say? There is no way Ethan could just think it was normal. Mia was seen arguing with him at the beginning of the game about her worrying about him, and Ethan questions why. This fight seems like something that would happen frequently or would always be in the back of Mia's mind. Did he just think he was okay because he just happened to be able to do these things?
Ethan wakes up in the back of Duke's carriage. Duke explains that his body is falling apart and Ethan brushes it off to tell him to get to Miranda. Duke somehow knew this and was on his way. Duke tells Ethan that after this he cannot return to his normal world anymore. This would be expanded in Shadows of Rose, with Ethan helping Rose and she can only take his ring back into the normal world. We head up to Miranda at the ceremony site and she's puzzled how he could be alive. Ethan coincidentally doesn't respond to these questions. Same with the ones where she asks if he's one of them. Now we get to Ethan's sacrifice. When he's about to click the trigger, he is encased with mold, or a type of black substance, that forms in the corners of his eyes. That concludes the story of Resident Evil Village. There are multiple things Capcom put in the game about dialogue towards Ethan that hints about his body. These include Alcina tasting his blood and mentioning he tastes stale. The daughters on the other hand disagree, but this would make sense since the daughters are dead themselves. Another dialogue is with the hag after fighting Alcina. Ethan says he could have almost died. She states, "How can a man be almost dead?" Ethan continues on by saying she knows what he meant, and asks her where Miranda took Rose. This prompts the hag to mock him by saying, "You're too late," or almost too late. Now if we put that same context into the first line, it is telling us about Ethan being dead this whole time. It is a hidden line that can be taken multiple ways and most people won't pay attention to.
As
The midnight moon rises on black wings. We await the light at the end. In life and in death, glory to Mother Miranda.
Hey, remember me? I almost died up at that castle. Tell me, what is going on around here?
How can a man be almost dead? That's a question for the wise.
You know what I mean. And I still haven't found Rose. Where did Mother Miranda take her?
You're too late! Or maybe almost too late. The child will be sacrificed, life for life.
What kind of sick medieval shit is this? She's just a baby.
The crests of the four bloodlines may open the path you seek.
What is this?
Let's go back in time to 2009. In Resident Evil 5, there is an important note that contains a mention about a certain somebody. Before Excella's boss fight in Chapter 6-2, there is a room that contains 2 notes. The one to the left is written and signed by the second living Wesker at the time, Alex Wesker. On the notebook to the right, there is a piece of paper shoved into it. It calls for an elimination of the staff at the facility. In Level 9 security, there is a man named Ethan W., who has the word deceased next to it. Could this be the Ethan Winters that we know of? There is a theory of another name on the list, and it coincides with our theory on Ethan's escape. In the DLC for Resident Evil 7, there is one called Ethan Must Die. This is the first time that a name has been so prominently put in the face of the viewer. The constant attacks on Ethan and making him the face of what's going on makes you wonder if there is more to it. The cover art shows Ethan and his left eye glowing red. This reminds us of the art with Albert Wesker having red eyes due to being part of the Wesker project. In the same note about Ethan W., if it is Ethan, could his last name not have been Winters, but actually Wesker? There were lots of people in the Wesker project, and he would be working under Spencer. It would also make sense that Ethan would be able to survive his death in RE7 due to him actually being a Wesker. Similar to Albert surviving the attack of the Tyrant in RE1, and Alex surviving the gunshot to her head in RE Revelations 2. A thing to bring up is that Ethan had blonde hair similar to the Wesker kids. Coincidentally, in RE7, we can acquire a gun named after Albert called the Albert 01. Blue Umbrella is trying to take the Umbrella name and put a good reputation to it, but why name a powerful weapon after someone who did wrong? Even more importantly, why not make it a thing in RE6? Blue Umbrella wasn't in that game, but why all of a sudden in an Ethan game? With Chris being in RE7, he was forced to go there, but his ego wouldn't allow him to use something like that since it is against his morals. Chris has always fought for justice, and especially with what happened in RE1, RE Code Veronica X, and RE5, and what Albert did to his loved ones, he would refuse. The last thing we want to talk about is the idea of Ethan having a clone. Clones are not a new thing in the series. Maybe Ethan was cloned by the man in the note in RE5 and he has no recollection of the past or where he came from. And that was it for our deep dive into Ethan's past and his events in RE7 and RE8. We've had a lot of theories on him and we think he's such an interesting character and our favorite protagonist of the franchise next to Chris. If you guys enjoyed that video, hit that like button, comment down below what you thought, and with that being said, have a good day.